presentation for that. So Terry, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Oh, neat.
Okay. Can everyone see the see that opening slide there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
sure can.
Okay. This is a presentation that Sam Swanson put together and has given several times. And he was generous enough to share the PDF of the slides from his show. And I think that just going through this, even though it's not my clinic, I think there's enough here that people will pick up some new information and see how Sam does it. And Sam has graciously offered to actually join us and to do a clinic sometime this winter. And I need to get in touch with him about that. But
Terry, can I ask you a question?
sure.
Can you enlarge that so the all the written stuff, or the stuff up above is gone?
Let's see if I can.
Ron, do you know how to do that offhand?
I'm looking on his
As large
screen.
as you can get, you might want to change your screen setting.
Yeah, that's not PowerPoint, is it?
No, it's
No.
not. That's
Oh,
PDF.
okay. Then that's
a
good.
PDF. Yeah.
That's good.
So it's got some clutter up above it.
That's okay. The picture's great.
Okay. Well, the overview, there's going to be some slides about summer trees, fall trees, foreground and background trees, kind of like big house, little house, front house, back house, like stuff in Maine. Just a moment, please. I'm sorry. My father-in-law called down the stairs. I thought he needed some help. I'm back now. So we've got a number of different trunk armatures. This one is a commercially available one, as is this one. This one shows up flat and then you bend it. This is an interesting thing that Sam uses periodically. It's sunflower roots. And so if you raise any sunflowers in your yard, it's well worthwhile to harvest the roots in the fall. I think that's a stilby, I'm not sure, but just different things, some of them natural, some of them are not natural. And then this is what his trees look like with some foliage on. And the critical issue with this is that none of the trees look the same. When you look at a wood lot, all of the trees are different. The only time you're going to have trees that look identical to each other is if they're manicured and there's somebody pruning them and trimming them. He put some texture on this armature, and color is generally some sort of gray, although he uses a lot of different things. Here's some armatures that he's done where he actually put wires, and this is another sunflower root, and there's bits and pieces of sunflower roots that have been added on, but a combination of materials. He does that a lot with the structures that he builds, and that he will use wood, styrene, and paper. And then ultimately, when he goes to do the finish coat, he'll prime it and do the painting after that. He uses epoxy to give a little bit of thickness to the trees, and recommends acrylic for painting. He uses a lot of craft acrylics. And again, you'd want your trees to basically be different. You can have thin ones, you can have mid-sized ones. I've seen a lot of people plant trees and they're all, mature trees, and you wouldn't have them all be mature. They've got to have little ones growing up. He uses a gray for trunks, and he makes sure that it's varied enough so that each trunk is different. And there's some variations. These are all sunflower roots, but they're all slightly different from each other. he recommends, you know, using the clump foliage. You can also, the fiber stuff that you can pull out that's from Woodland Scenics. All of this is available from Scenic Express. And he also uses ground foam. There's a little bit more added to them. And then the final for those 3 trees that he was building. I know the wisdom used to be for any lichen that you picked up or for any natural materials. Excuse me, I have got a tickle in my throat. I'm going to have to cough. There we go. But a glycerin or glycerol solution was what was recommended to keep things soft. I believe the current wisdom now is to use a 50-50 white glue water mix and dip natural stuff in it, because it will, you know, it'll make it stiff, but it will keep it from being so fragile and delicate once it's dried out. And this is just different types of material that he's using. You know, keep an eye out when you're walking through the woods. You'll run across some very interesting things that, you know, jump out at you, and you can say, wow, that would make an interesting tree armature. Sagebrush is an excellent thing also. I bought some recently. There are some companies that will sell you sagebrush, and they make very nice armatures. Here he recommends using spray adhesive. I know some people say use cheap hairspray. I think I agree with using something a little heavier duty than hairspray, and then coarse turf, and potentially followed up with fine turf. And I know one thing he mentioned is that he likes to use different colors instead of the same color on each tree, and to use a lighter color foam near the top and to use a darker color foam at the bottom to emphasize the shadows that you're going to see when you look at trees. Super Trees is a brand that makes for some very nice trees also, especially, you know, and again, you know, you want to make sure that you have small trees, not just all mature trees. There's his sunflower root. I harvested a couple of sunflower plants 2 falls ago, and yeah, they do make very nice, you know, potentially. I haven't bothered to put any foam on mine yet because I haven't had any need yet, but I do have a cafeteria tray full of these. That's what they look like when you pull them up out of the ground. And here he's got, you know, some of this astilbe or whatever weed this is that he's attaching. And then I believe he would then go and put like some finely ground foam over it to, you know, cut down on it looking like it's seed pods. But a mix of different wires and different sizes. And I'm not exactly, can't remember what this is, but he uses spray paint. I know Andy's got a method that he's using involving batting for background fields and stuff. Again, you want to just make sure that your trees all look different. And if you look at this woodlot in the distance, you'll see that there is nothing. I mean, every tree is different, slightly different color. So variety is what you want to make sure and have. Okay, large trees are ones that you'd want to have in the foreground. And you can notice in the background here, he has the puffball method going for his background trees. we often don't have trees that are large enough on our layouts because, you know, if you think about a 70-foot tall tree, also dead trees are a nice thing to model, especially if you have low lying areas or swampy areas. There's several dioramas that Sam has made. You notice a lot of scrubby bushes and scrubby trees on this also. This is taken from Lynn Westcott's scenery book from back in the 60s, I think it was. And, you know, he's got some good tips on here, but he also indicates that, you know, trees are erect. And I wished I'd gotten a picture of my backyard because I've got a bunch of box elder trees out in my backyard and they're not all straight. So, you know, I don't know that I totally agree with what Lynn came up with here. You need variety and variation, and the best way to go about it is to look at a woodlot and see what you see and try to model that. And there he's got, you know, small ones, larger ones. You know, you want to maintain a variety because that's what you're going to see in nature. Then he's got several ways to do foliate. Well, distant hills, these are basically pieces of insulation foam covered with ground foam. And that would be for very distant type setup. Something that's kind of mid-range, you can do the puffball tree method. The critical issue with this is you want to make sure that your ground foams, you use a variety of different ground foams. And if you look at that, I can remember rolling through the, you know, Appalachians and looking off in the distance, and you see a lot of variation. So that's the critical thing, is you want to make sure that you've got a lot of different stuff going on. That's how nature would look. And there he's got a foreground trees, and then he's got the puffball trees in the background. And here, let's see, no, not on this one. But he's got the more detailed stuff in the front to hide the edge of the corner of the layout. And then he's got some very small structures back in the back for a forced perspective type thing. And this is a diorama that he made of a shed. And there it is again with foliage added. And you can see, you know, there's bushes around it. And then the tree itself, he's added foliage to that. And again, around ponds, you're going to have a lot of scrubby stuff and bushes and things down near the water. Something that we sometimes forget. Saplings, undergrowth type stuff, bushes. And something that I don't see often enough, and, you know, I have to kind of remember my, you know, you spend all that time building a model, you don't want to have it all covered up with a tree, but that's what reality looks like. Trees will tend to grow up right next to structures. And again, just note the variety of different size of bushes and trees in this diorama. Now, a little bit about fall trees. It's kind of interesting. He pointed out something that I had noted. We have a sugar maple in the front yard. The leaves all turn very yellow on that. And then when they fall, they're yellow on the ground. And that's something that's kind of a neat effect to try to model, is to have, this is late fall, there's just a few spots of leaves still in the trees. They look mostly dead. But then when you get ready to actually plant a fall tree, especially if it's a late fall tree, you want to use some of the ground foam and place that on the ground where you're going to plant the tree. And that makes for a nice fall effect. And here he's planting 2 different trees. He uses the wire in the bottom of the armature method for planting his trees, and then uses the pins to actually poke the hole for the wire to go in. These are pictures of the module that Sam shows with the modular group that I'm in. And I really don't have anything much to add except, and I've given maybe 20% of what Sam would have given if he was giving this, but I hope you've appreciated looking at the model work that he's been doing. So are there any comments or questions anybody has got?
Terry,
Yes.
you know, a couple of things that came along when you use the when you brought up the super trees. Sometimes, you know, those can be very delicate to work with, and you start breaking off branches, and you have a lot of accumulated junk. But one of the things I found is you can use those fragments that fall off as to actually glue those to the armature of the the trees, and then build up your foliage from there. So they kind of help branch out the armature a little bit. That's one thing. And then on the leaves on the ground for your fall scene, one of the things I've come across is just this goes back to Model Railroader, I think years ago. Somebody was using, they would take tea bags that they made brewed their tea with, let them dry out, and open those up, and they make perfect ground leaves that have fallen on the ground, and they present a very realistic effect.
Yeah, there's a lot of really nifty scenery things available. Scenery Express is just a wonderful catalog to thumb through. There is a company I know that actually makes like little leaves, it looks like, that you can use for ground cover. But yeah, the trick with scenery is to just make sure that you've got a lot of variety, because there's just not that much area that it's all going to be the same, unless it's a mowed field or something like that. When you get into a woodlot, it's just a lot of variety.
Correct.
Terry, does Scenery Express still have a catalog, or is it? It's been a while since I've seen one. Is it all online, or do they also have?
You can. I
the
looked
paper
today,
catalog?
earlier today, and it's available online, and you can actually download a copy if you want to print it off. I don't know if they're actually sending catalogs out anymore unless you've made a recent purchase. If you buy something from them, they'll include one in the.
Yeah, I used to sometimes get it at the Ann Arbor show when they'd set up down there.
But they're alive and well and quite active, and it's a great company to get scenery material from.
Talking about those upright trees, we were driving up to the cottage Wednesday, and just north of St. John's, where you go back onto the older freeway, off to the east, there are 1 or 2 lines of trees that are well bent over that were, I think, field dividers. And so my wife was pointing out how they all ended up so bent heading to the south. They've been that way for as long as I've been driving up there, for the last half century or so. But again, that's something you would have a specific reason for, and probably want a photo for the prototype police.
Right. Yeah, I look out my slider in the back, and there are probably 5 trees that are off at some really strange angles. My trees in my backyard do not just go straight up.
Got a question about that spray adhesive. I don't know if you know the answer, but I tried, I don't know what kind, it might have been a 3M spray adhesive once. And when it dried, it was white and it kind of ruined my tree. Do you
Huh.
know if that, I saw Duro all-purpose, if that spray adhesive dries out clear or does it have the same issue?
I actually couldn't answer
Hairspray.
that, but Kevin, I will send an email to Sam and ask him. And I'll get back with you on that. I would assume
Okay,
that it
thanks.
probably does dry clear, or Sam probably wouldn't be using it.
Wouldn't it? Right, right. Hopefully it doesn't have the same issue and I can go look for that stuff.
Well, the beautiful thing is with Amazon, you can get just about anything,
Mhm.
even if it's not brand, you know. I had to look a little bit for that epoxy to see if it was something different, you know, uniquely different about that particular epoxy. And it's not, it's just a 2-part epoxy, but it's a fairly thick epoxy. So you could, you know, coat it on and let it dry.
Okay, anybody else have any questions for Terry?
I was going to say on the getting stuff to stick with, you can also use the cheapest hairspray you can find.
Yeah, but my concern is, will it stick forever? You know, it's kind of like a peel and stick model that, you know, I've gotten some laser kits that are peel and stick, and, you know, you really kind of need to glue that, in my opinion, because after 15 or 20 years, it starts kind of unpeeling. So I'm just curious
I've
about
got-
whether hairspray would last that long.
I've got some hairspray that I used like 25 years ago on my old layout. I finally took the last module apart last year, but the stuff was holding up.
Ah,
The only
okay.
thing that I'd worry about is if you got like a particularly damp or humid basement or something like that, it might be an issue, but I think hairspray is secretly glue.
Okay.
The cheap stuff is, that's what it is.
That's why they suggest the cheapest brands.
I think it was Aquanet or something like that at the time. You definitely want to go cheap, and it makes your room smell good.
Except there's some lacquer in there, so that's probably not good to breathe in, Kevin.
Yeah, it's all water-based. I don't know. Women are spraying it all around themselves all the time. I'm hoping it's safe.
One thing about the spray adhesive, to your point, Kevin, is that I've used a 3M, I think it's 77 spray adhesive. The thing about spray adhesive and foliage on the trees that I found is that you have to do it in stages. In other words, you know, spray on some adhesive, sprinkle the foam,
Yeah.
let it set, and then, you know, another, you know, application, so on. I haven't had the problem that you've had with, you know, a white film. Is it sort of what you see developing?
Yeah, it's like there was shiny white showing through the foam when I was done, and I
Mhm.
think I ended up spray painting the whole thing
Yep.
a really dark green and then recoating it with foam.
Yeah, that works too.
Okay, anybody
I can-
else?
Yeah, I can tell you, Terry, that's the first time I've heard of using rootstock for an
Mhm.
armature. That was very interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It is interesting. And, you know, like I said, I harvested 4 plants and I got probably 20 nifty things to start with, you know. So
So Terry, question, do you do anything to get rid of the critters or possible biologic growth when you dig those out of the ground? I mean, do you put them in the oven or you just let them dry out, or, you
I
know,
don't
or do you have
worry.
some interesting creatures that emerge from them when you try to put them on your layout?
Yeah, I haven't worried about that, because generally if I harvest something, it's going to sit in a box for a couple of 3 years
Yep.
before I'm going to use it and put it on the
Shit,
layout.
there you go. Yep.
I did get a hold of some leaf material once upon a time and ground it up. And I did put that in the oven to drive anything out that
Mhm.
might be there, but I don't think it was really necessary. It's kind of like, you know, everybody was buying their groceries back in March and bringing them home and wiping them down with wipes, and, you know,
Right.
it's
Right.
kind of overkill. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
You know, something else, Terry, about building up the trunk and the branches. I forget what you mentioned. What was the material that you talked about?
There was an epoxy that he
Epoxy. Okay. Right.
Epoxy putty.
Something else you can use. There's a lot of things you can use. Even caulk, latex caulk.
Okay.
And a lot of that is available in colors. It's a little tricky to work with. Sometimes you have to thin it out a little bit, but with water. But I've had some success doing that, and it requires some patience, of course, to apply it with a toothpick and that type of thing. But it works. Some people have even used plaster. I'm not sure that would be a good idea. It would probably crumble, but
Yeah.
caulk's another alternative.
I like using the super trees and breaking them up and gluing them onto plastic armatures. And also there's a number of companies that make plastic armature trees besides Woodland Scenics that have more armatures on them. And
I had a tree on one of my modules that, of course, an Aaron elbow knocked over. So I promptly brought in a tree cutting service. I had that set up in front of the yard, and which I become all too aware of. I have the local tree service up north on speed dial now because they've been either taking down or cutting up trees that came down on their own at about a rate of 3 or 4 a summer.
well, Terry can make crosscut saws on his Cricut machine too. So.
Okay, are we all set? I don't want to cut off anything if you got anything more for for Terry or the tree program. Terry, that was excellent. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. It was very nice.
Yeah, very good.
And also Chuck had to leave us and he said had to run, but great presentation, Terry.
Oh, okay.
So.
Yeah, I'm going to be leaving shortly too. Land Track